this happened, people close to Manafort were saying that the FBI was very aggressive and how they went into the home. Clearly today, the FBI disputing that account, saying they did everything right. They knocked on the door, no one answered, and then they went in.
So interesting. Shimon, thank you as always for your excellent reporting. Appreciate it. And here with me at the table to share their reporting and insights, CNN's Phil Mattingly, Times' Molly Ball, CNN legal analyst Shan Wu, who represented Rick Gates briefly after he was indicted, and CNN's Caitlin Collins. Hi, everybody. Oh, my goodness. So let me just start with something that was tweeted by the president shortly before we came on the air, and it kind of brings all of these questions of the morning together, and I will read it. Looking back on history, who was treated worse? Alphonse Capone, legendary, okay, we'll hold out for a second, legendary mob boss, killer, and public enemy #1, or Paul Manafort, political operative and Reagan Dole darling, now serving solitary confinement, although convicted of nothing. Where is the Russian collusion? Now, putting aside that we've all taken tours of Alcatraz and it wasn't exactly nice digs, what do we make of this? Caitlin, I'm putting this to you first.
Well, I think the last thing that Paul Manafort's legal team wanted on the second day of his trial was for the president to compare him to Al Capone.
Alphonse Capone.
Yeah, Alphonse on first reference. But we're seeing this. The White House for the past few days has been saying they don't know what the president's reaction to the Paul Manafort trial is. They haven't spoken with him about it. But we heard from the president for the first time this morning, only on day 2 of this trial that is expected to go on for at least 2 or 3 weeks, what exactly his feelings are as he's watching all of this play out on cable news. And this is also coming as the president and the White House are trying to downplay Paul Manafort's role in the campaign. That has been their strategy for months now, and we've really seen them ramp it up over the past few days, including from Kellyanne Conway and Rudy Giuliani. So inside and outside of the White House, and even from the president himself, saying that he was only there for a short period of time. But Paul Manafort was there for a very crucial period of time, including how he attended that Trump Tower meeting.
I mean, they can say all they want that they don't really care and they're not paying attention, but every tweet that the president sent this morning completely undercuts that argument in a big way. What do you think it means?
Well, it's a little surprising he's so worried about it, because actually...
Do you think there's something there that that he's worried for a reason that we just don't know about?
That could be. I think it's just the pressure of the trial actually commencing, getting to him, because frankly, I thought the first day went pretty well for the defense. Actually, I mean, it's like a breakneck pace. It's incredible they got through the jury selection openings and got to a witness. That's just amazing. But Ellis interrupted the prosecution during their opening.
The judge?
Yeah, the judge, Judge Ellis did. And that's very disconcerting for the prosecution. And I'm sure Manafort's team liked what he said. He pointed out that there's nothing wrong or illegal about having a lot of money. And I think they probably put that in the win column for the day.
Yeah, okay. So you might be right. Were you going to say something about what you think this could be about?
Well, I thought that the president's tweets about Manafort this morning were very striking, because they were sort of a reversal, as Caitlin was saying, from this distancing act. Rather than say whatever he did, he might have been terrible, but it had nothing to do with me. He's expressing sympathy for Manafort. He's saying Manafort's being treated unfairly. He's saying that, you know, Manafort had these glorious credentials working for Reagan and Dole. Now, one of the things that was discussed in the trial yesterday is that the activities of Manafort's, the money-making, the allegedly illegitimate money-making that they're talking about, was 2010 to 2014. So that's well after he would have worked for Ronald Reagan or Bob Dole. To answer the president's question about why didn't anybody bring this up when he was working for Reagan or Dole.
I mean, and that's another question the president was tweeting about this morning. Why didn't anybody tell me? I mean, that's the gist of one of his tweets this morning. Why didn't anybody tell me about the bad stuff that Manafort allegedly did? Well, really, just pick up the phone and call somebody, or ask him, or ask anybody. What happened to hiring only the best people?
I think the interesting element with Paul Manafort is it wasn't a secret, kind of the circles with which and within which he operated in Washington, D.C. If you look through disclosures to the extent that he made them, and sometimes that ended up being a problem legally, it turns out, he wasn't representing necessarily Fortune 500 companies. He was dealing in the areas of lobbying or influence peddling that kind of operate in the darker areas of D.C. And some of his partners and some of the people he worked with, if you talk to anybody who covered K Street or covered Paul Manafort coming up or covered Roger Stone coming up, any of those guys, there was an understanding of kind of the place that they were operating here that could potentially lead him into trouble. I will note, as a random aside, since he brought it up, solitary confinement. He's meeting with Republican senators on criminal justice reform today. If he has a huge problem with solitary confinement, it can be addressed at 2:45. That's important. That would be a step forward.
But for white-collar criminals, I don't think that's exactly
what
the topic is.
Things to keep in mind as they are downplaying the role that he had is that the president stayed in touch with Paul Manafort for months after he left the campaign. He left in August, and then they stayed in touch for months after that. The president has often done this with people who left the White House or left his campaign, but also with Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's deputy, who is testifying against him. He left as well shortly thereafter, Paul Manafort, but he and the president stayed in touch, and he served on one of his inauguration committees. So it's not like that the president completely cut off access with them when all these questions started coming up, which is why Paul Manafort left. They stayed in touch for months thereafter.
And Jan, I want you to react to this because the whole gist of what he's saying this morning and in a very aggressive way and what he said in the past, well, particularly when he's saying that Sessions, who technically has nothing to do with this because he recused himself, should end this, and because the collusion, the whole question of this is a witch hunt. Let's go back to what the Deputy Attorney General, who actually appointed Mueller, actually said the investigation should be about. Certainly collusion was part of it, but the core of it was the following: to ensure a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. Why, Mr. President, would you not want the Mueller investigation to find out the answer to that, particularly as it is happening, according to his own government and according to Facebook, as we speak?
No, that's exactly right. And I think one other aspect of that tweet that he said about being in the dark is he could be trying to now set up sort of his defense generally, that the bad FBI, the bad Justice Department didn't really tell me about what was going on, so don't try to blame me for anything. He's kind of like talking as usual out of both sides of his mouth here. I mean, he's saying he was kept in the dark, he's saying this is an unfair thing, and yet he's being told that the same type of thing is reoccurring right now. The one interesting thing about this in terms of the timeline is the Manafort and Gates indictments were first out of the box. We're now seeing a pattern with Mueller of handing off some of these investigations to the Southern District of New York. It's not inconceivable that had this come later down the pike, if it was compartmentalized to being just tax issues, that maybe it wouldn't have stayed with the special counsel. But it's first out of the box, and they're in the trial now.
Well, I know there's a lot that you can't say because you did represent Rick Gates briefly, but if you, knowing what you know, if you're the White House and the president, do you have a reason to be concerned watching this trial?
Looking at what's happened in the trial, not yet. But I think it may be just dawning upon the president that, oh my gosh, they really are taking Manafort to trial. He knows what dangers Manafort may have. And once this trial commences, the pressure is much, much greater on Manafort. And there are deals cut during trials. People have pled guilty mid-trial.
Deals cut and pardons. Is this a signal to Manafort that a pardon could be coming? Just stick with me.
Defer to.
Well, he's never ruled it out. The president has never ruled it out.
No one wants to get into the head of the president on that one.
Well, you shouldn't try to predict what the president is going to say, but he hasn't ruled it out yet. He's been asked time and time again. He's been quite snappish in his responses about potential pardons for them, or even pointed out that they haven't been charged yet with anything, but he has not ruled out the idea of that. So I think it's still there. But I do think over the next few days, as this trial is playing out, even though it has nothing to do with Russia, Russia is still looming large over this. And the more the president sees it, as we saw from his Twitter feed today, it reminds him of Jeff Sessions recusing himself, which is the #1 thing that has infuriated him since that last March when Jeff Sessions recused himself and then flew down to Palm Beach, and the president ripped him a new one over it because he was so frustrated about it.
And we are all talking about and trying to dissect and get into the president's brain, but we should not forget about the fact that it is so unheard of and inappropriate for a president of the United States to be saying in any medium, Twitter or anywhere else, that an investigation that is going on and was ordered by his own Deputy Attorney General should end.
Yeah,
not okay.
One real quick thing about that. Can you imagine if what he tweeted was discovered by reporters in a memo that had been sent in?
Exactly.
Like, we're kind of numb to 280 characters and how he operates, and certainly that's a way that got him elected, and it's an essential tenet of who he is. But can you imagine if that would have been found in a memo that was uncovered somehow?
Very different. Good point, Bill. As always, up next, enemies posing as friends to disrupt the November election. Facebook reveals 90,000 followers. Those accounts organized at least 30 events since 2017 and spent nearly $11,000 on 150 paid advertisements. Now, there's a Senate hearing going on this morning on this very topic, foreign influence in U.S. elections and social media. Intelligence Committee leaders in both parties are expressing deep concern.
This isn't about who won or who lost. This is about national security. This is about corporate responsibility. And this is about the deliberate and multifaceted manipulation of the American people by agents of a foreign hostile government.
For just pennies on the dollar, they can wreak havoc in our society and in our elections. And I'm concerned that even after 18 months of study, we are still only scratching the surface when it comes to Russia's information warfare.
Tarini Party with BuzzFeed joins us now around the table. I want to start by showing